Well, hello, friends, neighbors. Welcome down the Nook and welcome to another special episode of Whiskey Neighbor. And we have with us tonight a special guest, Julia Lee, from the Fort Distillery. Julia, why don't you say hello to the people that have joined us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm the distiller and the operations manager at the Fort Distillery. I've been at the Fort since 2019. Right after I graduated university, I wandered into the distillery and I just never left.
Oh, that's fantastic. I really love the wandered into distillery part because a number of people as they tune in here, we're whiskey buffs, we're whiskey geeks, and we can relate to that, wandering into distilleries and wondering how to stick around. So more than wandering in and sticking around, why don't you share a little bit, like I think I'd like to talk a bit more about that later, but a little bit, like how did you really get into the industry? Was it just dogged determination, but was there also, have you done some side-by-side work with other head distillers?
So when I first started, craft distilling was still fairly new. In 2019, there was probably just a handful, probably less than five in Alberta of the small producers. So at the fort, we made vodka and gin like everyone else. And eventually we saved enough time and money to have some barrels going. So one of the whiskeys we're trying today are some of my first whiskeys, like the first barrels I put down. The first that I've ever done of this kind, right? Distilling wise, before I came into the fort, I really didn't do any distilling. I did some home brewing, so I made mead, wine, all that stuff, and I just kind of wandered into distilling. I do have a chemistry background, so I have done distillations in smaller scales, like 50 milliliters, 100 milliliters. I think the biggest one I've done is probably like 1 liter, and that was unheard of. And at the distillery, our still is 600 liters. So from 1 to 600, that was quite the shock for sure. But I think it ended up pretty good.
Oh, that's really cool. So, as I've said before, a number of people tune in and they really want to hear about your whiskey, and I really want to talk about your whiskey. I want to open it up and talk to you. So, I think why don't we get into the whiskey, and then I would like to circle back to a little more about what the Fort Distillery is doing, what you're doing. I believe I saw a video on your website, you and Nathan talking about was it casual? You had two thoughts going on. It was like, quality or craft or something, and then casual. What were those two things you were doing at the fort with approaching distilling and spirits?
It was comfortable and approachable. Those
Yeah.
are the two words. So one of the big things that we always found with craft distilling is that things are too crazy, too exciting almost, right? So we wanted to tone it back a little bit, like bring it back to where people are comfortable and introduce just fun things that people can try without being overwhelmed.
Totally. I think that was great. I love those two words that you guys were trying to unpack with us. I thought that was really cool. So let's talk whiskey. What I'm going to do here is focus on this bottle a little bit. This is Mountain Pass, but I will say, haven't opened it. And also, Mountain Pass looking a little more special than the first Mountain Pass releases. This is Distiller Select 43.6 limited release. So while I open this, why don't you tell us a little bit about what went into this bottle?
Um, at the fort, we're really big on supporting the farms around us. So this is a malt barley corn blend. All of the malt is from Alberta. There's chocolate malt from Red Shed down near Red Deer. There's Kananaskis malt, which is also from Red Shed, and two row malt, which is from Penhold. So again, like everything in Alberta, we're really trying to focus on those Alberta grains. It's it was my first whiskey, so I was just excited that it didn't sulfur. So I was just excited that it was palatable. I didn't realize that it would actually be kind of tasty.
Okay, so that's good. I haven't had it yet. I'm quite sure it's palatable. But you mentioned three malts. Red Shed was your chocolate malt, and then you gave two others, and I was pouring and got distracted. Tell me the other two.
There's chocolate malt, Kananaskis malt, and two row. So Red
Okay.
Shed made the chocolate and the Kananaskis. So Kananaskis is like a high kiln biscuit malt,
Yep.
and the two row is just our base malt.
Nice. Now then, there's also some corn in this blend.
Yeah, it was just a balancing blending thing. I thought it needed a little bit of corn just to balance it out a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, but that obviously you distill all that separately. We're not talking bourbon type mash bill and then distilling together, right? Every one of those, I'm assuming, has been distilled separately, laid down in some oak, resting in cask, and then you put together the blend after that.
So the corn was distilled separately, but all of the malts were distilled together. Most
Oh,
of our whiskey is actually very American style, like 60% rye, 40% malt, or 30% like corn or whatever. This is the only one that I've blended so far.
okay. Well, that's awesome. Another question. I'm already knows it a little bit, but I'll share with you what I get in a moment. But what kind of casking, may I ask, you let the whiskey rest in? Or well, it's not whiskey until, of course, it's rested at least 3 years. But what were you casking the malts? I know those three you said you distilled together, and the corn. Can you talk a bit about the casking?
So, this would be our first whiskey. So at the time, we didn't have money for brand new barrels, right, from any sort of cooperage. So all of our barrels are the recharred barrels. So the old wine barrels that the people have planed down and recharred. Yeah, so all of the barrels are just recharred barrels. Char number 4, I believe.
Okay. Oh, that's just awesome. We're getting a few more people coming on now. Hi to Tater and Chris, Peter, and Seaway. Cheers. And Seaway, you shared what you're having a wee dram tonight. Is that a dram of 99 in red cask? Nice. I was saying pre-show to Julia really quickly that I'm really thankful that a number of distillers, such as yourself, Julia, have agreed to come on and just talk a little bit about more what you're producing, and also a little bit about how it is to distill in Alberta or in Canada, because I am hoping that people who tune in here or catch the rerun catch a little bit of the excitement that's happening in Canadian whiskey. So, do you have a little bit of whiskey with me, or is this all just me sipping and you helping me maybe get a little more out of the whiskey?
No, I got some here. I don't have a proper glass though. All of mine are broken, I guess, so we're drinking out of this.
Okay, well, let's just go in the nose a little bit and see what we got together here. So, actually, I'm really quite excited by some of the malt sugars, and you mentioned chocolate. For me, that immediately puts things in my mind. But where I'd go with that is a little bit of depth or chocolate wafer or graham crackers. Not necessarily chocolate on the nose, but it's a little more. If I say breadiness, that sounds wrong, but a little more hardiness to the nose. What do you get on the nose?
So chocolate's a big one. I think it smells like if do you know what Milo is? Like that malted chocolate powder.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a very common drink in everywhere but North America actually. And it smells just like that to me. It smells like a childhood chocolate drink.
Yeah. Okay. I can get that, but when you say that, to me, it's not that sweet milky. That's why I was saying I don't know if I said chalky. I didn't mean chalky, but that graham cracker, that chocolate wafer crushed up, that kind of bit of body to it, and then definitely that note.
Yeah, the malted chocolate, not sweet chocolate.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. That's definitely on the nose. I can get a little bit of some oak spicing going on in there. I don't know the corn for me, corn sweetness, buttercorn, depending on I can get popcorn and that kind of thing, but I'm not getting that here at all. Maybe just some sweetness, some nice lighter sweetness.
I don't smell the corn either. In my mind, corn and vanilla are very similar, and I don't get either of those smells. I get more of like a stone fruity smell, if anything. If you're talking about sweet, sweet.
Yeah, I could say that. If I'm trying to chase down some fruits, it would be a sweet fruit. So something like a stone fruit, I would go with. For me, I was a little more like, well, what's a sweet, like a golden delicious apple? Like, those apples that aren't like crisp, like Macintosh, but something sweeter. Like that's more what I was getting a bit. Cheers, Marcel. Thanks for joining us. And anyone wants to share what's in your glass, feel free. That's great. Well, Julia, the nose is lovely, but I think it might be time to have a little sip together. Should we?
Let's do it.
Cheers. Mm. Julia, you've done good work here, you and your team. And that, I mean, it's here I am getting some more sweetness. I like your stone fruit idea, but I'm also getting just a nice backing of oak, a little on the edges of my palate, a little bit of like sometimes I'll say spice. It is spice, but it's not like cracked pepper or even rye spice. I'm just saying it's got a little excitement going on here that I'm getting from some of that oak. Oh, and now on the finish, like just letting it rest in my mouth, breathing it out. That I'm still saying chocolate wafer. Those dessert chocolate wafers are coming back on the end, or even a light espresso, like a little bit of coffee note, kind of on the end, but definitely present. Ooh, I'm a sucker for chocolate malt, and this is done well.
Yeah, one big thing that I wanted to do was not make it super overwhelmingly chocolate. I know there's been some of those that those haven't been my favorite by any means, but this one's just a hint of chocolate, just enough so it's like on the nose, on the palate, but then it's got like that bready, like crackery feel, almost cakey. A lot of people have mentioned to me that it tastes very like Black Forest cakey. And after they said that, I started noticing like more the cherry stone fruit thing. So I don't know if that was in my head or not, but yeah.
I think I'd have to work on it for cherry. Cherry, unless it's a maraschino, like a little bit of a lighter cherry, but that dark cherry, I'm not quite getting a dark cherry on this one. I get that often in bourbons. Here, I could say like a maraschino cherry, but I like the rich idea of a Black Forest cake, right? Because there's a bit of that creaminess, there's that sweet cherry and chocolate. And you're right, I shouldn't harp on that note, but it is present. And when we think Canadian whiskey, I would say right now that's a bit of a standout. I'm trying to think of the last chocolate. Lowen and McKinnon. Did you ever have Lowen and McKinnon? They put out a chocolate malt a while ago that was um, had a lot of those notes in it.
I haven't tried that whiskey before, but I mean, I can always make my whiskey cabinet bigger.
And I happen to have it. I don't know where it's sitting on a shelf where I could recommend. We are practically neighbors, which is pretty cool, Julia. And I really do want to get out your way because the forts, by that I mean the fort. I have no idea where you actually live, please. I'm just saying I'm out here in St. Albert and you're distilling in Fort Saskatchewan. So that's really like 40 minutes down the road kind of thing. And I need to drop in.
Yeah, you can see my cask collection.
That'd be great. And cheers, Ben. Thanks for joining the crew. And everyone with water driving. Oh, wow. Tuning in. Okay. Well, stay safe, sir. So now that I've opened this up, and I will say I need to, like, this is not critical. This is just a good opportunity to open it up with yourself, to hear about the whiskey, your process in kind of fine tuning the blend. And I really appreciate that. To give more in-depth thoughts, I need to have it a few times, really to get the sense of where it's coming at. But I will say, first thoughts, I'm quite impressed, Julia.
Thank you so much. Like all of these kind words means a lot to me. This being my first whiskey, obviously, I'm very, very critical of my own work, right? So for the first, I think 5 renditions, it was garbage. It wasn't good enough. It was terrible. But in reality, like if you're sipping back to back, everything either tastes good or bad, right? So a lot of this is after you blend it, just take a step away or take a day or two away. Like the whiskey's not going bad by any means, right? And
Yeah,
it also
sure.
helps to get a second opinion, of course. Like we have lots of staff that are really good, like have really good palates, but whiskey is just one of those things where people who've made up their mind about Canadian whiskey have made up their mind about Canadian whiskey, right? So this is one of those things where I just urge people to try a bottle. It doesn't have to be mine, but try a bottle of Canadian whiskey. There's lots of good stuff out there.
And I would echo that. I'll even say some of the big producers are putting out a little more craft, a little more unique approaches. But in general, I would say anyone tuning in now or later, do consider the small distilleries. You guys, you mentioned what 600 liters. I'm pretty sure that qualifies as a smaller distillery. And I wanted to share. I've been down to Eau Claire. I've been out here to Hanson. They're a local here. Chris is running the show out there, and I find that yourself, as putting some malt in with a corn blend and different malts, local malts, are willing to really seek flavor profiles, different flavor expressions, as opposed to seek volume. Sales, of course, I know you're hoping sales. We're all hoping sales. I'm hoping sales for you so you can be successful in the next releases. But what I mean by that is you're clearly not a volume place. So you're taking your time and you're thinking about your distillate and your final product. So from a whiskey consumer, thank you for putting this out. Now, how roughly, because you guys started at 2018 and this is your own distillate, right? So it's still kind of under 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah. So this Mountain Pass is only, this one specifically is three years old. So I think it's like 40 months, which is like about 3.5. I think one of the big challenges with being a craft distillery is that you cannot hold on to product for that long. Obviously, I would love to have a 5, a 10, a 15-year-old whiskey, right? But the longer it sits in a cask, the more product you lose and the more money you're not making, right? I've been fortunate enough that like our distillery does more than just whiskey. We also do RTD cocktails. So that's been able to fund our whiskey program quite a bit so that we're able to hold on to products a little bit longer. Well, 40 months, I guess, isn't that long, but I would love to hold it on for just a little bit longer, just to get all those flavors out. But I do draw the line at like, what is it, immature flavors in the whiskey. I try really hard not to release anything with that because I just think it makes a bad name for Canadian whiskey. So it'll sit probably for the next couple batches. You'll get like some pretty young whiskeys, but hopefully I'll be able to hold a couple more now that we have like a constant stream going. And of course, like all of this is from support, like people like you, all of our whiskey lovers out there, because if you don't buy any, I have nothing to make.
Very fair. And I have had the pleasure of visiting with yourself and other small producers and have a small sense. Of course, I'm not living it day to day as you are, that the challenges of holding on, losing to Angel's share, not bringing in revenue. So I appreciate that you have other spirits as well that you can bring to market that people can enjoy. I think I was at a farmer's market. Well, no, I was at a farmer's market. But what I'm trying to remember is, was that a coffee brew or a coffee? We're a whiskey channel, but why don't you share like what that was? Because I remember tasting that and thinking it was pretty good.
So our lineup of ready to serve cocktails is our Tumbler and Rocks cocktails. So we have 6 core flavors. So there's old fashioned, Manhattan, Cosmo, margarita, espresso martini, and lemon gin martini. So those are 6 cocktails. So we do have whiskey in them. There's the espresso martini with the coffee. All of them are very good cocktails. They're very cheap and affordable. They're like single serve. You just pour them on ice or you go camping and stuff. So those are about convenience, right? And like quick sales kind of deal versus a whiskey bottle. Like I'm sure you have a half open bottle that you've kept for 5 years because you're still savoring it, right?
Yes, guilty as charged. I have a few. They're not usually in display out here, but they might be in the back. That I'm just nursing that last little bit, or I just have a tiny dram because it hits just right. For sure, and that's something that you, I think, and Nathan, one of the owners, is that right? Of Fort Distillery, when you were sharing about your experiences, you were looking at something that would be approachable and something that could be opened, kind of like a beer, because you guys were talking and you were saying like, what do you drink when you go home? Or like, a beer. How is that possible? We're a distillery. And so those ready-made cocktails, I think, kind of meet that niche. Is that right?
That's exactly what it is. Like, it's about convenience, right? Like, yes, sipping on whiskey is wonderful. Making a cocktail would be wonderful. But at the end of the day, like, if you had a rough day, do you really want to sit more? Do you want to wait longer? Or do you just want to crack something cold and have like a nice little sip at the end of the day, right? And so that's where our cocktails kind of came in, where, you know, I would love to have an old fashioned, but I don't like the little chunky sugars at the bottom, right? So throw them over some ice and you have like a perfectly mixed old fashioned kind of deal, right?
Nice. Yeah, when you were, I think it's a great idea, and I have a few more ready-made cocktails right now. I have to say, I don't know if I have it around here. A couple other whiskey fellows are importers, and they brought in that whiskey in a can. and that actually has hit my shelf and then the golf cart or whatever quite easily, right? Because it gets to have something on the go, and yet it's still whiskey based. You know, you mentioned doing. Was it you were saying like in here we've got some malt, and for my viewers, I'm sure you've had some grain henge. Have you from Troubled Monk?
I haven't had this rendition. The last time I had it, I was at their facility and it had painter's tape on it. So I don't know what I
Wow.
had.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, this is an earlier elevator row, but it is a malt. Now this is all malt, not malt and corn. But I think they are also working with Red Shed, and I know that Chris at Hanson has been working with Red Shed as well. So it's nice that you guys are supporting local, like full on in for your malt and whatnot. That's really really cool. I want to know if you're okay. Like I have to say, early thoughts. This is great.
Thank you.
I don't want to. I just and I'll just want to finish that thought in the sense of, for me, what's great is I really do like that balance of malt and a bit of that corn, giving it some body and sweetness. For me, has come together well. So I know you were saying some didn't make the cut. You had to try it again, but I think you put together a fine product, and I appreciate you coming on talking about it.
Thank you. Yeah, this one was the one I was most self-conscious about because you can blame a barrel, you can blame the grain, but if you're blending it, like you blame the distiller, right? And unfortunately, that's me. So yeah, I don't think there's blame to be had here. So I'll take it. I'll take all the compliments I can get. And this is the batch one of our series, right? So we have batch 2 and 3 as well. Those are rye. Those are mostly rye mash bills. They're also both single barrels, and they're very, very good if you like a good like spicy whiskey.
Oh, I very much like that, and certainly rye. So batch 2 and 3 are both like rye forward or 100% rye, or what can you share about it?
So these are both single barrel, so like they're not blended or anything. 60% rye from a farm in Josephburg, which is about 20 minutes from the distillery. The farmer actually drives up the grain in a tractor. I know one day he called me at like 8 asking me if I'd be at the distillery today, and I said yes. He's like, okay, I'll be there soon. It was about noon, and I was like, I think he's supposed to be here today. Like, where do you think he is? Knocks on the door. He has a tractor, so he's blocked up traffic for most of the morning. Really good guy, makes really good rye. But those the two whiskeys I'm talking about are 60% rye and 40% two row, and they're not as spicy as a typical rye because of the two row, and it has such a sweet finish. Batch 2 is about 44 something percent, and that one is a Wine and Beyond exclusive. And batch 3 is a cash strength rye, which I actually think we just sold the last bottle, so that one no longer exists. But if you want to sip, I have lots.
Oh, of course. But I thought, I was like, oh, okay, I've got to run out and buy. So the Wine and Beyond might still have some on the shelves if I venture out.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's hit the shelves yet,
Okay.
but it should be soon. I know that there's a pallet somewhere. I just don't know where. In some warehouse, probably.
But the other one you've already sold out, so you sold it like just at the distillery.
Yeah, just at the distillery, at some farmers markets. A couple of the cocktail bars in and about Edmonton and Calgary took like maybe 3 or 4 bottles, but that was a single cask at cask strength. So it was at 59 point something percent, and it's all gone.
Okay, I love single cask strengths. It's just kind of like that's totally. Do you have a mailing list? Actually, I can put in the comments or something. Like if I wanted to know that you were releasing a single cask, is there something like that you guys put out or no?
Yeah, if you go on the Fort Distillery's website, there should be some sort of mailing, like subscribe here type of thing. I think it's at the bottom of the page. I know that when our whiskeys come out, you get sent a list because I'm very adamant that my friends know what we're doing, right? And also, we need to sell it so I can keep my whiskey longer in the barrel, right? Yeah, so that's batch 3 is gone. But batch 4 and 5, those are going to be really good too. Those are some funky barrels I think you'd really like.
Very, very cool. So Marcel is saying, yeah, batch 3. Okay, that's some good calling, and that's actually thanks, Marcel, for putting in the comments that there are definitely some good bigger brand Canadians. Like I have a lot of audience overseas or in the States, and then something like your whiskey's phenomenal. Maybe you have U.S. distribution because I saw you had some on your site related to U.S. But generally, the people that tune in here can't find these beautiful craft releases. But something like Alberta Premium Cask Strength has been pretty good, and it's a nice benchmark to compare against. Of course, that's a big house. It's not the same approach that I know you guys are doing.
Yeah, Marcel's actually been a big help. He wanders into the distillery quite often as well, and I ask him for critiques on the whiskey, but I think he spends a little more time just drinking them. But I don't think that's a bad thing by any means, right, Marcel?
You'll have to answer that, Marcel. I don't want to speak on your behalf.
Yeah, we I think it was a week or two ago, I was opening up some of our batch 4 and batch 5, those two casks, and he just happened to wander by. Who knew? Just a nose for it. And those ones will be pretty good. Those are cask strength at 44%, so those are going to be really funky.
Oh, that's interesting to be that low percent at cask strength. Now, did they go into the barrels? Now I'm a bit off track, but did they go into the barrels at a pretty low strength, or just with the aging and the conditions, we saw a reduction of ABV?
So I usually put things into the barrel at about 50 to 55%. I think it has a better mouthfeel. That is an opinion, I think, that some people share and some people don't, but that's fine. And then our barrels, just because of the location, it's right under a gas heater. We get quite a big, the Angel share is quite large, like somewhere around like 20% or so, and which is terrible. So after the first month, like we filled it to about 200 liters. I opened up the cork and it was down probably 40 or 50 liters, which is pretty bad for the first month, right? So I read somewhere that gradual proofing is really important. And so I just gradually proofed it over like a couple weeks. And so I basically filled it to the brim. And yeah, so because of that, the whiskey is at a much lower proof. So basically, after its first 30 days of life, it got a big big shot of water. And now it's sitting pretty at like some 40 something percent. And it's been aging for, I think it's already 3. So I believe that'll be an April release. It'll be, there's 2 kinds. They're both single malts. One is a 44% cask strength finished in a port barrel, and one will be a single barrel. And they're both exactly the same, which will be really fun.
Yeah, and those are fun to do, like for someone like me, just consuming and enjoying whiskey side by side to see the different influences coming from the same house. I really, really love that. And yeah, it was actually Dr. Jordan Ramey recently to me, obviously not the same source that you read, really talked about stepping down, like the real gradual addition of water. Otherwise, you get that. I thought it was like saponification, but it creates soapy notes, that kind of soapy flavors. And so it has to be much careful. And that was fun because for me, I'm careful with adding some water, letting it rest, stir it around, but that's just on this end. That's not when you're proofing down an actual product like yourself. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's exactly why we were proofing it in the barrel. I wanted to reduce some of that soapiness. And I think it worked. So I'm excited. I'm excited for all of you.
Right on. So may I ask, we've talked about your whiskey. We've talked about some upcoming whiskeys, and I put a link to the site to anybody who wants to get on your mailing list, because you'll let us know maybe what farmers markets you're at, or however we can get a hold of a bottle that's coming out of a single cask, because those are special. But I did want to take a moment, I believe it was on your website, to talk about, if you're willing, some of the challenges and victories you've had coming into industry that is actually fairly male dominant. I've talked to Caitlin at Eau Claire. I've talked to Jenna at Sons of Vancouver, just, great icons for me of local craft whiskey. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity, if you want to talk about like maybe some of the victories or some of the things that we need to do better as a whole industry to make sure all people are at the table and able to make good whiskey like this.
Yeah, I mean, you've brought up a very, very interesting topic. This is a very like big publicized thing where women aren't really in whiskey, whether it be because of some sort of discrimination or just like an uncomfortableness, right? We can say that about whiskey. We can also say that about oil and gas if we want to relate more to our Albertan crowd, right? Oil and gas, majority of the operators, majority of engineers are also male. And I worked in oil and gas prior to coming to liquor. So this world is not new to me, or my position in this world is not new, right? I am a woman, I am a minority, and um, there are certain disadvantages, of course, right? People are less receptive to what you have to say about things. So my tasting notes would not be as valid as yours, for example, even though this is what I do day to day. That's something that I get quite often, which is infuriating. But with every bad person out there, there's also your supporters, your champions, right? I've talked to a lot of whiskey people who want my opinion, who want to know what to mix this with. They ask me if this is good or if this is bad or if this distillery is worth talking to or if they do shady things, right? So with there's bad in every corner, but there's also good. So like I wouldn't say that we can write it off completely, and there are strides being made. So I recently graduated from the Our Whiskey Foundation program. It's a mentorship program targeted for distilling women or women in like a distilling field. So for me, I'd be a distiller. There are people in marketing, all sorts of interesting things. And it was a really fun program. Like it's based out of the UK. They set you up with some big shot. I got set up with the owner of a giant distillery in Chicago. I think Caitlin is actually a mentor of that program as well. And she's a big shot down in southern Alberta. Yeah. So it's always, all of these things are good. Like people are like, we're supporting each other, helping each other grow and stuff. I find like this is almost year 5 in this industry. I find that I'm gaining some more traction, not only with experience, but like with just people wanting to know my opinion, right? Versus previously you'd be dismissed from a room. You wouldn't even like, the door would be closed before you'd enter. Now the door is open, right? So that's always very interesting.
I am so thankful that the door is open and that there are programs, as you described, to connect with some pretty big mentors or whiskey moguls, as you mentioned, someone on a big distillery in the U.S., to keep us moving forward. I'm always, and I shouldn't say I'm always surprised. I'm disheartened that we're not all welcome at the table because we bring different experiences, and I think our experiences of whiskey, the way we nose it, the way we taste it, the more variety we have at the table, the better the experience. You know, I've been at so many tastings where you know people will start sharing notes. We're like, oh yeah, and then someone will go, hey, I'm getting sesame seed. You're like, sesame seed, and then you kind of chase that around, and you're like, oh wait, I am getting some of that honeysuckle or whatever, like whatever they tossed into the ring. And so I'm just very thankful that yourself are making beautiful whiskey like this. And I hope your work can be an inspiration to more people getting into the industry. And specifically here, I'm saying, you know, more women or more minority as well. I think we need more people at the table. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd also like to say that I know in different provinces it's been much more challenging. I know some of my friends in BC, it's an old boys club. It's very hard to get in. But my partners here in Alberta, the distilleries in Edmonton and Calgary have been nothing but supportive. That's my experience. I'm not here to speak for everyone, but I've clawed my way into this. And I think that we have a very close-knit community. Like in the Edmonton area, there's like, 5 or 8 distilleries, I think. And not one of them have made me feel small, which is really important to me, right? So that's always very, very good.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that a little bit, Julia. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I didn't give you any heads up on that, but I did see a mention of that on the website. So thank you for sharing. A comment from Peter White mentioning, and we were talking a bit about the next batches, but his question specifically talks about, does your distillery ship into Ontario? Because I know more and more do. Can you answer that?
Yep, all of our products are able to ship all across Canada. So if you go on our website, like you can see batch 3 is sold out. Batch 1's still online. Batch 2 is a Wine and Beyond exclusive. Batch 4 and 5, they'll be released simultaneously. One of them is an exclusive, one of them is ours. And I think they should be out in like about April. We should be getting the labels in a month or so. And I'll see if the whiskey's ready yet. Again, I want to let it sit for as long as possible. So whenever my boss kicks me, that's when it'll come out.
It's been really exciting to spend a moment to open your whiskey here. I appreciate it. I'm enjoying my first thoughts and hear a bit about your story in the industry. Thanks to those that came online as well. I hear Seaway giving you a call out here to sharing a bit of your story. So again, appreciate you taking the time to do that with us, Julia. Do you have any closing thoughts to us whiskey people here? You've given us lots of thoughts in terms of get on and check your website and look for batch 4, and you do ship across Canada. But is there any closing to anyone who might be tuning in later too about whiskey in Alberta, whiskey at Fort Distillery, some things you're excited about?
Honestly, I'm just excited that people are excited about Canadian whiskey again. I think there was a little dark period there for a little bit, probably before my time. Sorry, but I think it's getting up there again, and I think it's worth giving them a try. You know, if you look at the craft distilleries in Edmonton, if you read their reviews or their like live stream similar to this, all of them are good in some way or another, and because I think a lot of Albertan distilleries are not focusing on being the best single malt or being the best rye. They're just focused on being the best whiskey or the most unique whiskey. There's some really funky things coming out right now with all sorts of different types of grain. Just I'm sure a lot of people are talking about terroir. This is our Albertan terroir, and I think we should celebrate it and keep trying the funky things that people put out.
Great words. Thanks, Julia. And I totally agree. I love this journey. I'm glad to be on it a bit together. It was nice to meet you today for the first time. I haven't, and I really need to get out to see you doing some of the magic out at the Fort Distillery. That would be really great.
It was really nice meeting you too, John. This was fun.
Yeah, totally. Thanks again. And I will say thanks to those that came on and gave us some comments and some questions. I really appreciate that as well. And just hope you guys have a great night.
Have a good night.